Welcome to From Migration to Celebration, Conversations about Scandinavian Legacy. Today's episode is titled Unveiling the Possibilities of Scandinavian Connection. Our guest is Abbie Eads, as she traces her journey as a young performer to Miss Norsk Hostfest 2012 and now a pivotal figure on the board of directors. Abbie's conversation is bound to lift your spirits as she unravels the unexpected connections forged through the Hostfest, leading to Scandinavian ties that have shaped her life in unimaginable ways. Delve into the significance of nurturing relationships that transcend geographical boundaries as Abbie shares heartfelt anecdotes of her Norwegian connections. Also, gain insider tips and insights from Abbie, ensuring an unforgettable experience when attending Hostfest this fall. Enjoy this conversation with Abbie Eads. Abbie, thanks for making the time for us to chat about the Hostfest, and of course, thanks to you for all your contributions that keep the festival going. You've been coming to the Hostfest since you were a tiny person. What's your first memory of the Hostfest?
Yeah, first Hostfest memory would probably be performing with Myron Florin, a total legend, yeah. Lawrence Welk
Delve into the significance
superstar.
of nurturing relationships that transcend geographical boundaries.
I know that both of my
grandparents,
my grandfather was 100%
also,
German, my
gain insider
grandmother
tips
100%
and insights
Norwegian.
from Abbie, ensuring an unforgettable
loved
experience
going
when
to
attending
see,
Hostfest this fall.
Myron Florin
Enjoy
on
this
stage playing
conversation
accordion.
with Abbie Eads.
And I actually got two different opportunities throughout the years to perform with him. One was as a dancer with the Norwegian sweater crew, and then also in the Western Plains Children's Choir. So yeah, I've had a good time.
So you kind of grew up here. The Hostfest has always been a part of your life. It's pretty much been going every year since you were a kid. What are your impressions of Hostfest from childhood to adulthood?
The biggest thing that I think pulls me into coming to Hostfest every year is honestly the memories and the connections that I have with the people that come here almost every single year. Certainly people that attend who are from Minot. You see them throughout North Dakota. I remember a Canadian couple that I met in 2012 when I was Miss Norsk Hostfest, and even just in those 4 days, we created a really wonderful bond, and if I saw them on the street today, I would still recognize them and know their names. But also tons of connections that I've made in Norway. And those relationships have now extended beyond the week of Hostfest. And one of them being inviting some of them to my wedding last year and seeing them when I travel over there too.
Does it surprise you that people willfully come to the little town of Minot for something like this? When I think of traveling or going places, I love Minot. It's my home. I've worked, as many of us who still live here, I've worked to make my home a place where I like to be. And it just never ceases to surprise me that people want to come here. I don't know why. Maybe it's because I'm from here, but it's just like we're just a little dot on the map. We're almost Canada. And yet the Hostfest manages to attract people from all over the world, from all these Scandinavian countries, from all over the United States. What's your reflections on the fact that this little town of Minot has a magnetism that brings people together to make connections at the Hostfest?
Yeah, I think you're right. Minot, the city and community of Minot is incredible, but it is kind of off the beaten path a bit. Usually when people say they've been to North Dakota, it's driving through Bismarck on the interstate. So it's even when they're through our state, it's kind of off the beaten path. And I think, of course, like Chester Wrighton and Pam Davey, they've set a tone throughout the last 44 Hostfests of creating an atmosphere and creating an experience with high class entertainers and chefs and artisans that that a lot of them are from our community and within this region, but also all over the world. And I think the trick is getting the people to get off that path and come here. And once they get like even the slightest taste of it, I think that they catch on how incredibly special it is.
There's world-class talent at the Hostfest, and world-class not just performers, but chefs and artisans and craftspeople. And this has become a very connective place. And I like that you talk about the connections that you've made and how important those connections have become in your life. When you were meeting these people or making those connections years ago, did you know how important they were in that moment?
No. Yeah, some of the conversations that I had Hostfest in 2012 when I was Miss Norsk Hostfest, of course, I'm talking every day to hundreds of people, and some of those conversations were 5 seconds and just saying, hey, how are you and where are you from? And other conversations were maybe a half an hour. But no, it never, I never expected those conversations to lead into lifelong friendships. I mean, that was the first year I met Rolf Haugen, was in 2012. And now he is like a grandfather to me. And I would do anything to see him whenever I can, and whether it's here in the States or over in Europe. And it was really just because of the simple connection that we made at Hostfest that one year.
How do we help people? Because you were young then, of course, and now that you're an older version of yourself, sometimes we undervalue things that later become important in life. And even as you're reflecting on those connections you've made, you were 20-something coming into a house, the first thing, how to make a bunch of connections, right? It was a Norsk Hostfest Christmas, beautiful honor, congratulations, thank you. But you didn't come here as a 20-something intending on making a bunch of connections. But then you reflect on a decade plus of coming to the Hostfest, and the first thing that jumps out at you are the connections.
I think with the Hostfest, certainly as a board member and a supporter, I think one of the biggest things that we can encourage for festival goers is that despite a lot of the stuff that is showcased here being from hundreds and hundreds of years ago, there is a relevance to it. It is a part of who we are and who our ancestors were, and a lot of the successes that they had were from the connections that they made with other people. And I know one of the things that I've heard a lot this week is the incredible act of the first Norwegians that migrated over to the United States. I can't remember what year it was. I mean, when you think of 52, 53 people and how many people we get here in a week at Hostfest, like it is powerful. And I think that has to be our goal as the Norsk Hostfest every year, is to really highlight the trajectory of where we came from and where we are now, and what can we learn from our history, and not just that, what can we learn from today, right now. And I think having a sister city like Cheyenne, where they are struggling in that city and dealing with a lot of the same stuff that Minot struggles with, and that sister city connection can only help both sides and giving each other ideas and encouragement of building bigger and better communities that last.
Yeah, there's a really fabulous culture of exchange that happens between sister cities. And we had, of course, a chance to visit with Rolf this morning, and he told us you made quite the first impression as an exchange student going over there. What can you tell us about your first time visiting Norway as an exchange student?
Yeah, so it was actually just a coincidence that I was Miss Norsk Hostfest the same time that I was planning on going over to Norway. I just decided that, I've been going to Hostfest for however many years it was, and my grandmother was 100% Norwegian, and I had the opportunity to take some time to go study abroad. So I jumped on it, and I remember I was in tears on my flight from Minot to Minneapolis, and then a little bit more brave Minneapolis to, I think it was Amsterdam, but I was going over to Norway, to a small town where I didn't know anyone. I was 21. Of course, I had a few of the connections that I made that fall. Like I said, that was the year I met Rolf Haugen, and I also met Jan Terje Olsen. But that year, at that festival, the Telemark and Cheyenne delegation surprised me by honoring me with a scholarship to go study there. So they knew I was going over, and they wanted to support that. And that was a huge, incredible first impression of the people over in Norway. Once I landed in Oslo, that family I mentioned, the Olsens, they picked me up from the airport, probably 2 hours from their home. They let me stay at their house for the first night, and the next morning I woke up and they had breakfast for me. They already had a cell phone for me to use while I was over in Norway, and I was on their family plan. Then they drove me to the little town that I was going to study in and live in for the semester, and took me to the grocery store and bought me my first round of groceries. And then throughout that semester, they were always available, and I would stay with them quite often when I would go to Cheyenne to play in the orchestra there. And truly, the Norwegians that I've gotten to meet over the years are some of the most generous, hospitable people that I've ever met, and that's made a huge impact on my life. And it's a kind of a perpetual wanting to give them just as much as they give me and give Minot. And I think that's a really important connection and relationship that we need to forever cultivate and care for.
So I'm almost hearing there is a ton of Scandinavian influence in our way of life in North Dakota, even if it's subtle and we don't always see it. What really stood out to me just now was that you got a big old dose of Midwest nice right there. Maybe we should call it Norwegian nice.
Norwegian nice, I like that, yeah.
That is something the Midwest is known for, in spite of being called a flyover state. We're known for being some pretty nice people. We're the hi, how are you folks? We're small talkers. We're visitors. We like that. So I was doing some studying about Scandinavian culture, and something that I kept coming back to, folktales. They were everywhere in all my research. Visiting was said to be also a big part of Scandinavian culture. And yes, everybody visits, but I don't know. I don't know if they do. Some cultures don't put an emphasis on visiting, and visiting isn't always small talk. It's, we're going to sit down for 2 hours and have coffee, talk about today, talk about tomorrow, the weather, life in general. I think visiting, yeah, it's a big deal.
I definitely experienced that visiting culture. Even my first night in Norway, I got to the Olsen's house, and they had the beautiful Norwegian home, very kind of warm, rustic vibe. And they had a real fireplace going, and served me my first bit of akavit. And akavit is the Norwegian liquor, kind of like a vodka, I guess. I wish that I had the money to send everyone in North Dakota or the U.S. to just go spend a semester, a half a year in Norway, to experience that kind of slowed down pace of everyday life. My first experience with that was in school in Norway. I had a project that I was supposed to be working on throughout the semester, and there wasn't really a set deadline. It was kind of a bit ambiguous, and I grew up being a very deadline-driven, focused, type A perfectionist student, and so that was a huge culture shock for me, was this idea of it'll get done, it'll happen, and let's slow the pace, much more lax and laid back. And you know, someone might argue, well, how much do they get done then? But I mean, look at Norway. They are a successful country and community in so many ways. In a lot of ways, we can learn a ton from them. And then when I moved back after kind of finally embracing that slower pace, coming back into the States was like a huge kind of hit into a wall, and rushed back into this be the best, be the fastest, get it done the fastest. Once you're done, you move on to the next thing. And ever since then, I kind of promised myself that I would try my best to hold on to that slow-paced vibe as much as I could. It's not always the case, but that is something I really appreciate about the Norwegian way.
Okay. I think that's a very powerful takeaway, because sometimes life is already moving so quick. Even if we're trying to take it easy, it's going so fast. One of my favorite things about any festival I've been to, Hostfest or otherwise, is trying to be really present in the moment and take in what's going on around me. And there's something that's been powerful about what festivals represent, is that presence. And to me, it's always been almost like I want to unplug from the rest of the world and really be here at this festival in this moment with everybody else who's here. There's so much to experience, from the entertainment to meeting new people. And I find that Hostfest seems to be a really big epicenter of these cultural mechanisms. And maybe it's not quite being given credit to everybody who didn't grow up with this event. They don't see it. They don't know it. Sure, there's a lot of us around here who didn't grow up with that. It was just this thing that happened at the fairgrounds, and some people went and some people didn't. But it's so much more. How do we communicate that to everybody? How do we communicate how important this is for everyone, even if they're not connected to this tradition?
I think the way we bring people in was something that was talked about a lot as we were preparing for the festival this year. And that is, we want to create an experience. It's not just going into the North Dakota State Fair Center where it's decorated like Scandinavia. You're actually walking into Oslo. You are walking into a Viking village, and you can sense the energy of the Vikings. And we've had ideas of doing Northern Lights, something that is very Scandinavian. So walking in and having the visual experience of the Northern Lights. But I mean, we've talked about culture, food with music and artisans, there are tons and tons of things that tickle every sense that someone has that comes into the festival, and I think we need to really tap into that, is showing them this is what you're going to experience, not just see or taste or whatever. It's a full-on experience.
I like the emphasis on experience, because someone who isn't prepared to have an experience might not expect this one. And there's vendors and there's food. Sometimes people aren't sure of how to approach a new experience. I know when I went to my first ever festival, I really wasn't prepared for what any of it was. Now I know what to expect. Now I know how to experience it other than just wandering through and engaging people. And it's like, how do we foster that will to engage with everybody? You know, is there like a First Fest type of ambassador that maybe helps people with the experience? I'm your ambassador. I'm going to help you do all the cool things together. We're going to sit down with one of these artisans and hear them tell a story. Yeah, I just wonder about these things, because there's so many experiences to be had here. There's so much to do. There's so much to buy. There's so much to eat. And there's even so much more than that. So I guess, Abbie, somewhere in here, I'm trying to get to a question with all this commentary. I suppose maybe I'm just curious. And all this that we've talked about with these experiences and the food and everything you've done in your life at the Hostfest, why should this matter to somebody who is not already connected to this heritage and these traditions? I think that's my question.
So my husband, Emerson, he's not of Scandinavian descent. He wishes he was. I kind of told him, since he married me in a Norwegian Stav church with a bunch of Norwegians present, scripture read in Norwegian, sung in Norwegian, that he's an honorary Norwegian now. But he is kind of a mutt, but we all are. But he more so identifies with a Czech lineage. And I have heard him say numerous times that when he comes to Hostfest, which was new to him just 5 years ago or whenever it was that he first started going, when he came to Hostfest, he was certainly impressed with all things Nordic and Scandinavian, but it encouraged him to want to find that ancestral connection of his own. And I think I've heard a lot of people who maybe don't identify as having Scandinavian or Nordic heritage, or maybe they do and they just don't really care. They choose not to come because they think like, how special can it be? But I think once they just give it a half a day, come to Hostfest for a half a day, they are inspired to really look into their own family and their own heritage. Even if it isn't Scandinavian, there are still similarities. I mean, I'm a musician that has studied Nordic music, but I've also studied the composer of Dvorak, who's Hungarian and Czech, and there are tons of similarities beyond the Nordic borders. Tons of people just sitting down and visiting, and tons of people who are very, very hospitable and nice, just like the Norwegians. And I think that people need to just give it that bit of a chance, and they can see that this inspires them in discovering other areas of their own heritage.
Should we not ask people, are you curious? Yeah, you're a human being, right? Aren't you curious? This is a place to be curious.
Are you curious should be Hostfest's slogan for next fall.
You heard it here first.
Who doesn't love mythology and stories about the Vikings and trolls hiding under bridges and those are captivating stories just in and of themselves, and I love that as a festival we're trying to vamp that up a bit more in that experience for people.
When I was researching what is Nordic culture, if you just Google that, one of the first 2 or 3 things that comes up on every single page is folk and fairy tales. At least according to Google, folk tales and fairy tales are synonymous with Nordic culture and the Scandinavian way of life. So I'm in agreement. I find that stuff to be very fascinating. I think it's interesting, and there's a long and rich history there. There's a reason these stories have stood the test of time, and people are still passing them down 2, 3, 4, 500 years later. So I do think there's a lot of interest in that. And again, are you curious? Are you curious about food? Are you curious about drink, craftsmanship, entertainment? What is your curiosity as a person? Because we have it here at the Hostfest, whatever it is you are curious about. And if you're not curious, we'll help spark some curiosity in you.
That's exactly it. And I think that's how a lot of us on the Hostfest board and a lot of the volunteers, I think that is how we feel. We know it's awesome because we already love it, and we enjoy it not just during Hostfest week, but numerous times of the year. I'm always celebrating 17. Mai and decorating bits of my home at Christmas with Norwegian trinkets and things. So yeah, I know it's awesome, but that's totally it. We need to really encourage people to be curious, and maybe they find out that they love lutefisk, and maybe they eat it and never want to have it again, and that's fine. There are many other things to eat besides lutefisk.
Something that keeps coming back in the conversations I've had is community, a strong sense of community and peacefulness. I feel like perhaps you connected for me in discussing Emerson was that he didn't feel that he had a place in this community until he did. Until he found his way here and was welcomed. And I think in life, people are always looking for something to belong to. And maybe there's folks that haven't found what they belong to yet. We need to get them here at the Hostfest. Who can find their sense of community here? And in that, I'm wondering, Abbie, what does community mean to you?
Community, to me, is certainly a sense of belonging, but without the sense of judgment. That's a big thing for me. That sense of safety, that you can be in a space or be around those particular people and feel a sense of safety, that you can be yourself, whether that's Norwegian or Swedish, though we don't like the Swedes very much, or not Scandinavian at all, whatever, young, old, but certainly a sense of belonging and safety. And I know times have changed in the last decades, but I run around these halls at Hostfest totally feeling like I belong, and that people are really eager to get to know you and understand you and know where you're from and what you're about. And yeah, it's special. There aren't a lot of weeks during the year where it's quite like what we have here at Hostfest.
I think that there really are a lot of people who haven't found their sense of belonging yet. I'm not saying they're lost, but they haven't found that strong sense of community like what is offered here. I want to get them invited. I want to get them here, get them in this package, come and experience a sense of belonging, try a new food, get some entertainment, buy some crafts, do a craft, visit with people. But above all that, At the Hostfest, you can experience a sense of belonging. You can meet people who care to hear what you have to say. People who ask about your day and really want to hear it. They mean it. It's genuine. Okay, last question. What advice or recommendation would you give to someone attending the Hostfest for their very first time?
If you are attending the Norsk Hostfest for the very first time, I would say try to come in with no big expectations other than you're going to get to see and taste and hear a lot of really cool stuff. Keep your senses open and alive. Maybe just find a little spot on a bench somewhere and take 5-10 minutes and just look around and see all of the people in their sweaters or their bunads or their volunteer vests. Aside from the festival goers that are walking through the halls, we certainly have our awesome paid staff, but the majority of the people who are keeping this going and running are unpaid volunteers who just love the festival, and not just the festival, but they love the people that they get to see at the festival. And that sense of community and reconnecting year after year. Sometimes people only see that one connection at Hostfest, and they come back to Hostfest every year because they know they're going to see Rolf Haugen, or whoever it may be. And I think that will be something that is easily grasped and noticed by a newcomer for the Hostfest, that it really is a special place, and it doesn't take more than a few moments to see that when you walk in the door. And then just enjoy. Go ask someone, hey, where are you from? And maybe you'll win $100 from the Secret Viking.
We hope you enjoyed this conversation. For more information on the Norsk Hostfest, please visit www.hostfest.com. This podcast was made possible by the Minot Area Community Foundation's Williamson Fund and the generous support of private donors. Thank you for listening.